Here's the story.
Oh, I'm so rested. Slept like a baby last night. How'd that go for you? Get any sleep? Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. This is the story. I'm going to be honest, kind of right up front. Tonight's show is going to be all election all the time. We're getting right into it, mostly because, you know, it is Election Day, the day after Election Day, rather. It's come and gone, but the election itself is not over, which has been a little bit of a weird feeling, right? Not knowing the outcome. It's kind of like floating in space. So we're going to try and, I don't know, be the gravity to bring you back down to earth tonight. So if you have any questions, comments, lingering anxieties, we're all ears. I mean, look at your screen. Those are all the ways that you can talk to us. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Email thestory@kgw.com. Or as always, you can message me on Facebook and Instagram. I can't tell you what we're not going to do first. We're not going to freak out about the electoral votes or the voter margins in Cobb County, Georgia, or suburban Pennsylvania. We got a lot of smart people at NBC News keeping a close eye on those extremely kind of important parts of this race. In fact, I should mention, they're going to be taking over again after the story tonight. Instead of how we usually give it to Laurel Porter in the news at 6:30, NBC is going to keep their whole thing going. And I trust that you are extremely interested in keeping up with all that. You know exactly where to find the information, NBC, KGW.com. But when it comes to the story, we are going to stay in our lane. And that means two things. One, we're not going to be redundant and waste your time. Two, we're going to help keep everything that we've learned in the last 24 hours in perspective. And sometimes the people with the best perspective on stressful things are people who haven't been jaded by life yet, kids. And with that, I'm going to begin tonight with a message from the students at Tigard High School.
I know right now you don't want to talk about the election because it's by far the thing at the forefront of everything. It's in forefront of the news. Everybody in sports is talking about it. But let's have a real conversation right now.
We have two options. If our person loses, we have anger and resentment and we hate. Or if our person wins, we rub it in and put other people down. Or we can take another avenue of understanding that no matter what happens during the election, we are all still going to have to be in class together.
We're still all going to be human beings.
We're still all going to be students at the same school.
People underestimate the power in our hands. It feels like a lot of things are out of your control.
But you to understand the power you have in your own state or your own school district.
But you need to understand. You need to organize.
You need to go to work.
The president isn't going to solve all of our problems. You have to put the work in to make the change. Being mad at someone for who they voted for will not get you the change that you want.
That just makes the divide wider.
Being divided doesn't get us anywhere. Being together does.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And they're right. We do have to go to class together, okay? So let's be civil. I don't know what's going to happen tonight or tomorrow or the rest of the year. We may have an idea kind of how it's going to end, but we don't know for sure. So before we jump into politics and elections tonight, just one more word, a personal one. Be kind to each other. I mean, it's actually really easy. Here's an example. If someone posts something online and you really disagree and you want to call that person a name, just don't. You can do it. I believe in you. Okay. Ready? Let's get to the big story. And it is Portland's soon-to-be brand new city council. See, as of last night, we know now who's going to lead Portland through probably one of the rockiest moments in the history of the Rose City. And it's going to be the most diverse city council in the 169-year history of this city. Mayor Ted Wheeler's victory over challenger Sarah Iannarone means in January, when the new city council is seated, he's going to be the only straight white guy on a 5-person council. With Mingus Mapps beating Commissioner Chloe U. Daly, he will be the second black Portlander on council alongside Joanne Hardesty. Dan Ryan, recently seated, is gay. And when Carmen Rubio replaces Amanda Fritz in January, she will be the first Latinx on council. This morning, Mayor Wheeler talked a little bit about this new cast.
I am committed to supporting smooth transitions so that our new city council is ready to hit the ground running in January. And I know that Commissioners Ryan, Rubio, Hardesty, and Mapps will help make sure that our good work continues.
Okay, but let's get to, the meat of all of this. What does this new upcoming city council really mean to the city's goals, with where we're headed? I mean, that's the million-dollar question. One thing we could see is a push to change Portland's commission style of government. I mean, we are the only major city left in America that runs a city the way that we do right now. Now, Commissioner Dan Ryan supports changing it, and now he has an ally, Commissioner-elect Mingus Mapps. Not to mention, Rubio and Hardesty have also said they would support this change, and so has the mayor. He says as long as people in this city, the people, the voters, have a say. So the entire council could agree to change the style of the city government, and that could mean Portland ends up with a more traditional city manager style of government, and that could mean that city councilors would be elected by specific districts across the city that they would represent, instead of a citywide vote for everybody, kind of like we do now. It would also mean hiring a city manager to run all the various bureaus instead of just doling them out to these councilors who may have no experience in that specific field. Now, Laurel and I talked with Mingus Mapps last night, shortly after he was projected to win that race. And Laurel asked him about a topic that came up a lot in his race, and it was his approach to police reform. Here's what he had to say.
So I think one of the lessons of the last several months is that Portlanders demand police reform. That we want we want an approach to policing which is less militarized, which has a greater emphasis on prevention, and that focuses in on rehabilitation. I believe in that too. I'm excited to be part of the discussion as we pull Portlanders together to think about how we can go about building a public safety system which reflects our values. And, you know, I think the way we do that is not by abolishing the police department, but I do think that what we need to do is to start with a clean sheet of paper. We need to think about the kind of public safety system that we want, and then look for the programs that will get us there. And some of those programs may be related to the police department. Some of them might be completely outside the police department. And I think that one of the ways that we prevent crime is not by having more police, it's by having more prevention programs.
Now, Mayor Wheeler said he plans to reshuffle all the bureaus at the start of the year. Mapps said he has no idea which bureau Mayor Wheeler might be assigning him, but he did say he's interested in running Peabody. But listen to me, getting ahead of ourselves. We're already talking about 2021. Well, we aren't even through 2020 yet. Our current city council still has some pretty big decisions to make, like one tomorrow, on whether or not to defund the Portland Police Department by an additional $18 million. Commissioner Hardesty and lame duck Commissioner Udaley both say that they will vote to defund, while Mayor Wheeler, retiring Commissioner Fritz, and Commissioner Ryan say they just need some more time to make this decision. Ryan is expected to be a key swing vote on this. And if he is, we're going to get a chance to talk to him all about it on Friday when Commissioner Dan Ryan joins Laurel Porter for Straight Talk. And you can bet how he votes tomorrow will be a big topic of discussion. If you have any questions for Commissioner Ryan, send them our way. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. Straight Talk airs Friday night at 7 o'clock on KGW. But let's talk about a specific race. I want to zoom in closely on Mayor Wheeler's victory last night over Sarah Iannarone. Now, with his win, Wheeler pulled off something that a Portland mayor hasn't done in 20 years, and that is actually win re-election in this city. It hasn't happened since 2000, when Mayor Vera Katz won her third term. But we've had 3 mayors since Katz: Tom Potter, Sam Adams, and most recently Charlie Hales. All 3 of them have not served a second term, though not because they lost. They didn't run. All 3 of them chose not to run again for various reasons. Ted Wheeler did run, and he won. But if you look at the numbers you see on the screen right there and do a little bit of math, you'll see that a majority of people actually voted against him. And that's because of that large number of write-in ballots, nearly 13%, which makes up more than 45,000 people total. Now, the thing is, we don't know, we might never know truly which names were actually written on those write-in ballots. See, when the election staff is counting all of the votes, they tally the ballots in the write-in category as a single group. And if it actually looks like a write-in might have a chance of winning by comparing the candidates' actual percentages, then they'll go back and actually sort them out and look at all of the names. But this race, 13%, that wasn't going to get it done. So they didn't even, parcel them out to see whose names are written on there. We do know, though, that there was a write-in campaign for activist Teresa Rayford, which did have support from other activists. She was polling at one point with a decently substantial number of 6% late last month. A man named Joseph Whitcomb was also running a write-in campaign, branding himself as a conservative option to Wheeler and Iannarone. Again, we don't know how many people actually wrote either of those names down on their ballots, or any other name for that matter. The only thing that we really can decipher from this is taking a look at where people decided to cast these write-in votes. Now, the Oregon Secretary of State's website breaks down the results by individual precincts in Portland. North and Southeast Portland, which favored Iannarone, had a lot more write-in votes than West Portland, which favored Wheeler. And you might be saying, there's the proof. There we have it. The write-ins were siphoning from Anne Arundel. But then you take a look at Far East Portland. Parts of that community there, they favored Wheeler, and they also had a high percentage of write-in votes. So the bottom line, there's a lot unclear really when it comes to write-ins and the contribution they played to all this. But it does tell us one thing. A sizable share of people in Portland weren't happy with either candidate on the ballot. But our Pat Doris actually had a chance to sit down and talk to Teresa Rayford and asked her directly this morning if she thought the write-in campaign that surrounded her affected this election.
When I saw those numbers this morning, like I said, it was astounding.
When I look at the difference between Wheeler and Anne Arundel, it's like 19,000 votes. I think you probably got the majority of the write-in votes, which was more than 45,000. Do you worry that maybe you cost her the election?
I think that people that voted for Ted actually helped Ted win the election. I don't think that anyone that voted for me would have actually voted for Sarah Anne Arundel. I think we have different values.
Okay, well, let's bring in Pat Doris for just a moment. And Pat, we heard what Teresa Rayford had to say about how she thinks she might have impacted or didn't impact this race. But I was curious what your thoughts were on that as somebody who has covered politics and races like this for a very long time in this area. How substantial was her involvement to the outcome that we saw last night?
It's hard to ignore the numbers, Dan. 45,000 people that wrote in for some candidate. It reminds me of 20, maybe 25 years ago when the conservative Republicans in the race for governor would battle each other within the party, and there'd be a nominee, but then there'd be a write-in candidate that would siphon away just enough that would allow the Democrat to win. She believes that this is a new block of voters that would have not voted for Anne Arundel. It was Teresa Rayford or nobody, but it's hard for me to believe that there weren't a decent number of those that maybe would have gone for Anne Arundel if they didn't have the choice of going for Teresa Rayford.
All right. Pat Doris, thanks.
All right, another race that I want to quickly focus on here is for Washington's 3rd congressional district in Southwest Washington. Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler is ahead. Now, the script that we were going to read to you, literally as Pat's story was running, changed a moment ago. A couple minutes ago, it was going to say, but Democrat Carolyn Long isn't giving up yet, saying she's waiting for more votes to be counted. But as of, 5 seconds ago, we are hearing that Carolyn Long has officially conceded. Rare breaking news here on this story. NBC has called this race for Herrera Butler. The Associated Press had not yet. We at KGW typically rely on the AP for election calls, which is kind of why it was delayed here on KGW as making this call. But as you can see, it doesn't matter at this point because she has said, Carolyn Long has said, I'm no longer in the race. In Washington, if you're wondering why sometimes those races can take a little bit longer before we can get official results, it's because they're still counting ballots. Ballots are allowed to be mailed in up until Election Day. So that means that some ballots, could be mailed yesterday and is still in the whole process of arriving. They haven't even been opened or counted yet. In Oregon, our ballots actually have to arrive by Election Day or they aren't counted. And that's why most of our votes are counted the night of.
If there's anything we've learned in 2020, it's that a fake tweet from Governor Brown travels further than a real one. And we decide that the best way to win the war on drugs is to embrace the enemy. When the story continues.
I'm stressed. I've been stressed. But I'm hopeful.
It's a wait and see and let it go because I have no control over all that.
I'm feeling fine. The cost of a McDonald's hamburger is going to be the same tomorrow as it was yesterday.
Sad, hurt, just worried.
I don't mind it taking a while. It's just it's so close.
I think we have a good system in the United States, but it seems like it's being abused more and more all the time.
Yeah, emotions are usually pretty raw the day after election, usually, especially in a situation like this when the election is so close that it still hasn't formally been called. Now, if you want to let us know how you feel, you see some people have. Look at your screen. You see all the ways to reach out. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. You can email the story at kgw.com. And, not to panic anybody, but as of today, it is only 1,462 days until the next presidential election. So it's just around the corner, really. By the way, we did just find out, if you were kind of watching towards the end of our first little block of news before the commercials, we just found out in the last couple of minutes that Carolyn Long, running to unseat Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, has conceded in Washington. So Long is officially out of the running at this point. Herrera Butler will hold on to her seat and will still be the only Republican to lead a congressional district that touches the Pacific Ocean. And that is, I mean, those are the facts. That's real news right there. That's something you can believe in, because the theme of 2020 so far, at least on the internet, has been all the rumors and the misinformation that's been crawling around, especially this week. And a lot of it really took off today as the election has kind of dragged on. Kristen Severance has been sorting through some of them for us and wants to separate the facts from the fiction.
So I have one social media post to debunk and two Hey Dan questions to answer that we continue to get. But first, I want to start with this fake post from Governor Kate Brown. So this was sent to us from a viewer. I'm going to go ahead right away and mark this as fake. So it says, if Trump gets reelected, Oregon, Washington, and California formed a pact to declare independence by the end of the month. Again, that's false. The governor's communications director, Charles Boyle, told me the governor's social media pages contain 15 posts from yesterday, and this is not one of them. We often see inflammatory or offensive posts that are falsely attributed to the governor being shared on social media as if they are real. We urge all Oregonians, trace the source of your news and verify it is coming from a trusted source. I could not agree more. All right, next I want to answer a Hey Dan question. This is from Glenn. He asks, what happened to the Oregon City mayor recall? All right, so technically nothing yet. Ballots for the Oregon City mayor recall are not due until November 10th. The ballots must be returned in the blue-black striped envelopes, not the same envelope as your general election ballot. More than 43% of Oregon City voters have returned their ballots so far. Mayor Dan Holliday is facing a recall after several controversies, including telling businesses to open in April during Governor Brown's shutdown order. And then lastly, I want to answer a question that we continue to get. We've been seeing this for a few weeks now. So Shelley emailed saying, should the My Vote website say whether your ballot was accepted or not? She says, it says that my ballot was received, but it does not say that it was accepted. Many of my friends and family members in Columbia County are having this issue. Does this mean our votes were not counted? So she's talking about the My Vote section on the Secretary of State's website. While ballots can be marked as received, they have not necessarily been verified and accepted into the vote count. If there are problems maybe verifying the signature on your return envelope, you will be notified by your county elections office and have 14 days after the election to resolve any issues. Do you have issues? Do you have problems? Do you have questions? Let us know. Just use the hashtag HeyDan.
Through all of the division that elections can bring out, there was one thing that many Americans were able to agree on last night: drugs. And that brings us to tonight's edition of Vice News. And let's start with the magic measure, why don't we? Oregon State Measure 109, which legalized psilocybin treatment. Now, by now, you probably know that psilocybin is the psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms. As you can see on your screen, Oregon voters widely approved this last night, 56 to 44%. Now, Oregon is the first state to legalize it for therapeutic use. The city of Denver also legalized it, but it's a different bill with different rules. And again, that's just Denver. It's not the entire state of Colorado. Here in Oregon, what this means is, look, you're not going to be able to go into a plaid pantry and buy a bag of shrooms. Instead, there will be a 2-year development period, and then it will be administered in regulated service centers. Then there's Measure 110, another measure that was approved by the entire state of Oregon. In addition to providing addiction services, 110, this bill decriminalizes the possession of small amounts of hard drugs, things like heroin and cocaine and methamphetamines. Oregon passed this by an even wider margin than the psilocybin bill. This one was 59 to 41%. Another first for the U.S. I mean, no other state has passed anything like this. The point, organizers of both these have said that the emphasis is to be on treatment and not punishment.
In small town Oregon, rural Oregon, frontier Oregon, people are still impacted greatly by addiction, whether it's themselves, family members, friends, coworkers, or looking around at their, neighbors and community.
Now, beyond Oregon, 5 other states in the U.S., they legalized weed in some fashion. Arizona, New Jersey, and Montana, they approved recreational pot. South Dakota approved recreational and medical separately. And Mississippi okayed medical marijuana. And that has been Vice News. Sometimes I wonder, what if I would have just taken that segment, put it in a time machine, and sent it back to people 20 years ago? I wonder what they would have said. What would their comments be on Facebook? How are you feeling, by the way? I hardly ever ask. Are you good? Are you tense? You feel awful? Do you feel amazing? However you feel, let us know. I'll read some tweets, emails, messages, that sort of stuff after the break when we finish the story next.
Do you trust the process?
Yeah. There's a hesitation there. Yeah, I trust the process here in Portland or in Oregon because of the way we vote for many years.
Well, actually, it's a good thing because we do have a court system. And the nice thing about having a court system is we have the freedom to, when we don't agree with something, let's go ahead and take a look a little deeper and let's let a judge or a jury decide.
All right, welcome back to the story. We are going to do another. We had breaking news a little bit earlier tonight. We were talking about Carolyn Long conceding in Washington to Jamie Herrera Butler. And now we're doing another kind of rare moment on the story where we take a live image from Sky 8. But you're looking at what appears to be a relatively small demonstration compared to what we can typically see here in Portland. But this is happening downtown near the waterfront. We've seen these in the past few months, nights rather, and months. But we saw something similar to this last night. It focused mostly around Black Lives Matter and the types of chants and messages that come from those crowds. And last night, I hope that we see the same thing tonight, which is peaceful demonstrations. And as we talk about tension and people being anxious in this city, waiting to hear the results of the election, I think that this is one of the points of focus. How will the city react when it comes to whatever the news may be, and whoever leads this country moving forward? But just know that here at the story and KGW as a whole is paying close attention to all of it. Also, as we were talking about the drug decriminalization and the psilocybin bills and the things that passed, it was interesting to me because we've talked a lot about those on the show, but I posted about on my Facebook page. I don't know if we have a screenshot of that, but literally hundreds of people have weighed in, and the conversation seems to be a whole lot more split than the voting actually was. And when we shared it to the KGW page, there was more than 1,000 comments. So if you have something to say, you can message me directly or hop on there and see if you can get into a conversation. The people who comment on my page, it's not mean stuff overwhelmingly. It's kind and it's thoughtful and it's smart. So if you want to have a smart conversation on your Facebook page, go to mine, and I'm betting you could find one. We got a couple of comments that I want to read here. Elaine Playart said, I was one of those defund the police people, but then I researched a little bit about the Cahoots program in Eugene. And if you don't know, we kind of have something in the works right now called Street Response in Portland, where they have mental health counselors and people kind of in the health field responding to calls that might be somebody having like a mental break instead of sending a person with a gun. So we're working on that now, but because of COVID, it's kind of pumped the brakes on it a little bit. But that's something that the city is preparing to do as you're talking about how we rearrange the police department. Dale Burt said, why does KGW, the website, have a different number of electoral votes than what Chuck Todd is reporting on NBC? And as we reported a little bit earlier, we call races based on what the AP is calling, not necessarily NBC News. And, with that said, coming up here in just a minute, you're typically used to seeing Laurel Porter join me. She's usually standing right over there, but she's not in here tonight because at 6:30, we are going to hand things back over to NBC. Of course, so much still going on with the presidential race, states to be called, and the race to be decided. So we're going to send it back over to the experts in NBC, and for now, we're going to say bye here at the story until tomorrow. Thanks for being with us.